Hey folks, I have not done a weekly update in a while. I apologize for that. I did, things have been kind of nuts lately, both in my personal life and in, the broader macro political situation in the United States. I've been kind of, a little distracted because of that. Of course, I think a lot of us are feeling the same way. Um, I recently did put out a video, a long form analysis of a an ARG called How to Video Results. I also released a corresponding interview with the creator herself, Shay Gardam. So if you have not had a chance to check those out, I would encourage you to do so. It was a fun project. I enjoyed doing it. I haven't done a long form analysis in quite some time, because of, uh, I've been dealing with that whole colon situation. So I haven't had a chance to really focus on a longer project, and it has been a pleasure. I am, in other news, working on something right now. I guess I'll go ahead and tell you what it is because it shouldn't come as a huge shock. Um, so, the creator of Petscop, Tony Domenico, um, released a new sort of how would I put this? It's like a short story. It's like a comic book almost, a web comic, or rather, I would say, um, that it was released very shortly before Halloween. So it is a horror story, not surprisingly, and it's a very interesting project. It's called 3D Workers Island. Um, it is about a what would the elevator pitch be for 3D Workers Island? It's like a haunted screensaver. It's a short horror story about a haunted screensaver. And I guess I would say, uh, haunted in this context, we can sort of unpack that. It is definitely an interesting work. I've had a chance to kind of look into it a bit further. Um, it's a very layered work, especially considering how short it is. I would say, relative to Petscop, this is a bit more of a um, contained work per se. Like, in other words, it'll probably take you maybe about half an hour, 45 minutes to actually um, read the short story and kind of engage with the visuals. I'll go ahead and include a link in the video description for this video, just so you're able to check it out. Um, but yeah, I won't say too much more about it because I am in the process of analyzing it. I have a lot of things to say about it, but we're going to save it for a future analysis video. Um, in other news, I will be in Brooklyn in a week or so, and I am very excited because I'm going to be attending a screening of Petscop. So, if you're not aware, the very first screening of Petscop occurred at Spectacle Theater in Brooklyn last month, and now they're doing an encore performance. So, I wasn't able to be there for the premiere. Um, but I am going to the encore performance and I will be attending a short Q&A afterwards. I'm really excited. I've never been to Brooklyn before, so yeah, it should be a lot of fun. Um, I don't know. I'm being regarded as like an authority on Petscop, which makes me slightly uncomfortable because it's like, I'm just some guy who did a lot of analysis videos about Petscop. That doesn't necessarily mean you should that you should just take my word for it in terms of like my interpretation. It doesn't necessarily mean that I'm an authority per se. Um, I have my own interpretation of the work. I've analyzed it through uh, a number of lenses at this point, I would say. You know, if you watch my videos, you know what I'm talking about. Um, you know, but yeah, it's exciting. Uh, I, I'm humbled by the fact that they would consider me for doing a Q&A for this sort of thing. So I'm looking forward to it. If anyone has any suggestions for fun stuff to do in Brooklyn, I am all ears because we'll be there for a few days. Um, and I've never been there before. I've been to New York. I've been to Manhattan. Um, and the last time I was there, that was quite fun. I really enjoyed it. Big fan of New York City. I will say that. I didn't think I was gonna be, but I absolutely loved it. I mean, you can just get any type of food you want at any time, basically. It is it's a great city. What can I say? Um, what else is going on? Yes. Well, oh, okay. So the other thing is I put out a statement on my community page um, for my YouTube channel, and it was in reaction to the election, the outcome of the election, and I bet if you have been following me for um, a prolonged amount of time, you shouldn't be terribly surprised at what I think about the outcome of the election. Um, I am quite angry, um, but at the same time, I do think it matters where you sort of channel your anger and then where you direct your anger. Um, I do think it's the Democratic Party's failure primarily to really articulate how their policies will help the working class. And it's a failure of, you know, their advisors and the Harris campaign in general uh, that they tried to sort of play it down the middle. They tried to do this sort of middle of the road politics, and they didn't meet the moment. They were touting the endorsements of Liz Cheney and Dick Cheney. What else can you say, honestly, when you find yourself in the company of, a war criminal, neoconservative monster? Um, I think you are probably not on the right track. I don't know what else to say about that. I mean, it seems like common sense to me, but you shouldn't be shocked that that didn't really um, resonate with people or animate them to vote for you. You know, another thing that's interesting to me, and if you don't like me talking about politics, you can turn off the video, right? But this is my channel, and I'll talk about what I want. And oh, what was I going to say? So, what's interesting to me, and uh, you know, this is kind of a strange phenomenon, like how um, like people are generally on board with uh, policies that are ostensibly aligned with a more left ideology, right? Like a lot of these policies are quite popular, right? Like single payer. Um, I bet a 4-day work week would be extremely popular if you polled for it. I'm not sure about the data for that, but um, a perfect example here in Illinois is there was a ballot initiative to raise taxes on millionaires in order to provide uh, relief in order to essentially lower property taxes for the rest of us. Um, so in other words, here's how it would work. We would raise taxes on millionaires. That money would go towards schools, and that way we could lower property taxes. Because if you don't understand the situation here, most of our property taxes are going towards schools, right? Um, and people complain about really high property taxes in Illinois, and that definitely is a problem for sure. It is a problem largely affecting middle class and lower middle class individuals. I think upper middle class individuals can afford the property taxes, and ironically, they're the ones who complain about it so fucking much. So that's kind of funny how that works. But I digress. Anyway, this this ballot initiative um, is I forget the terminology, but it's non-binding. In other words, it won't go into effect just because people voted in favor of it. It is sort of an advisory ballot initiative that then goes to the state legislature, and they can deliberate on what should be done based on the outcome of this ballot measure. So uh, an amendment to the state constitution has to be done in order to overturn the flat tax. That is a big hurdle right there. Um, but here's the good news. I think it's like something like 64% of voters in Illinois supported a tax on millionaires in order to provide relief for property taxes. So um, don't let anybody fool you into thinking that the Democrats need to shift further and further to the right in order to win future elections. That's bullshit. That's complete fucking bullshit. Um, the fact of the matter is that that ballot initiative to tax millionaires, specifically to tax millionaires, that's how it was worded. Um, Passed with flying colors. I think something like 64%. And just to keep in mind, Harris in Illinois, a state that traditionally supports Democrats uh, very, very strongly. Usually, the Democrat in Illinois for the presidential election has a very strong support. Illinois is traditionally a very very blue state, and that's largely because of Chicago. If you if you go 45 minutes south, you will run into conservatives. You know, not surprisingly, but the in terms of population, um, yeah, like the majority of voters lean Democratic. It's actually very strongly Democratic, but um, so my point is that Harris, I believe, won Illinois 53%, I think was the how much she won. So um, that millionaire tax, that was 64%. So that ballot initiative outperformed her by 11%, meaning what? Meaning at minimum, a some Republicans supported that measure. Um, Ironically enough, and some independent voters, I'm sure, were in favor of it as well. So um, I think left policies are um, quite popular, and you actually should have a candidate that represents that worldview. Um, a lot of people are saying things uh, to the contrary right now. Oh, there's been a lot of psychological reactions to Trump winning, pointing fingers, blaming the left, even though we're a completely marginal. Um, it's a very marginal viewpoint in the United States. We don't have a lot of influence. We don't have a lot of power, and it's kind of funny that you would blame the left. Of course, the left is it kind of functions as a floating signifier, right? Um, it kind of means whatever you want it to mean based on what your what your worldview is. If you want to get down into the nitty gritty of it, to me, the distinction between left and right is pretty clear. The left looks at things in systematic terms and says, why is the system incentivizing these, whatever societal problems exist? We assume by default that if there are, for example, criminality, antisocial behavior, um, it's only natural to assume that if this phenomenon is occurring in large enough numbers that it's noteworthy, that there's something going on systematically that is creating the conditions where that give rise to that, for example, antisocial behavior. Um, so, we look at things in systematic terms and we try to understand why the system is giving rise to these problems, right? Um, and then we try to think, well, hey, how could we change the system so that this isn't such a problem anymore, right? I mean, a classic problem, a classic sort of disagreement amongst the left and right would be like um, in terms of like crime, right? Like the leftist perspective is that um, crime is a direct sort of result of poverty in a lot of cases. Obviously, there are exceptions to that, right? But if we want to reduce crime, violent crime in particular, the logical thing to do would be to try to alleviate poverty to the greatest degree possible. Um, and then I think you would see a pretty clear drop in violent crime, right? But the right's reaction to this would be to sort of look at it in individual terms and say that, you know, um, these people have committed crimes. They need to be punished. They need to be locked away, and we need to provide more resources to law enforcement so they can do their jobs, right? So it's sort of a reactive approach to crime as opposed to a proactive approach of like trying to stop crime before it emerges in the first place is the logical thing to do, right? Um, so this is kind of, I'm just trying to spell out like this is how I understand the difference between left and right. And sort of if you're looking at things in terms of the traditional view of the political spectrum, um, the right they sort of they view things in terms of this individual should be held accountable, whereas the left is more like, well, actually, that person didn't have a fucking chance in hell of being a productive member of society in the first place for X, Y, and Z reasons. And therefore, like we should change the system so that these things don't happen in the first place, right? I bet I'm not saying anything you don't already know for the most part, but I'm just trying to articulate my worldview. Um, and the traditional view of the left-right spectrum, I won't say it's like um, a completely unproblematic thing. I, th especially in the 21st century, things are going to get very confusing very quick, I believe, with Trump now being elected again. Because he's sort of he's a very how shall I put this? He is uh, all over the place in terms of what he wants to do with respect to policy proposals. Obviously, like the big example of this that kind of confounds things a bit is he wants to impose all these tariffs, right? Which liberals try to argue is going to create more inflation, right? And that's a valid concern. Of course, if he is indeed serious about imposing tariffs at the level he says, I mean it's he's not really consistent with any statement, so it's hard to say. He's just posturing, right? Anytime you hear Trump speaking, he sort of testing the waters with, like, do people like this? I think people are going to like this thing I'm about to say. So, he's just trying to please his base, for the most part. So it's hard to tell what he's actually serious about. What I will say is, he did impose tariffs, to some degree in his first term, and it wasn't the end of the world. And Biden actually continued some of the tariffs he did. So, obviously, this is uh, kind of a point of contention. Whether or not tariffs actually are appropriate in any given circumstance. Um, who's to say, really? I guess we'll see. I don't know. Um, what I will say is, of course, um, Trump makes a lot of noises to the effect of, you know, his rhetoric is strikingly similar to that of a fascist, and that shouldn't be minimized or ignored. Um, the real question to me, because here's the thing that kind of distinguishes Trump from like a Hitler figure. Um, for starters, he's not really committed to any one position. He's kind of a fuzzy sort of, you know, like you could easily see him changing his position if it benefited him. He just does whatever is going to benefit him personally for the most part. Um, so the thing that really complicates the situation in the United States is, the fact that it's undeniable that there is an administrative state that has its own distinct interests, um, that is not subject to any kind of democratic control, none whatsoever. Um, and this 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 provided a sort of check on Trump in his first term. Um, and I believe that will be the case again in 2024, to some degree, right? Um, the issue is, so, when I say administrative state with its own distinct interests, what does that mean exactly, right? Like that sounds sort of conspiratorial, but it's not. It is something that has sort of emerged and taken shape over the course of the past couple hundred years here in the United States. And it is a sort of um, it's a bureaucratic element within the United States government. Um, and like the CIA is obviously part of this. The NSA is obviously part of this. Um, this should come as a shock to no one who is paying attention, really. Um, the question to me is, I think Trump is going to find some convergence in the interests, of certain things that he wants to do, and that of the administrative state that I'm talking about. Um, the clearest example to me is, it just being a very hardline pro-Israel. I think that's perfectly in line with the interests of the administrative state. Um, and so, yeah, it's not looking good on that front for sure. He can really enable and cause a lot of harm, when it comes to the Israel-Palestine conflict. So that's not good. Um, the With respect to certain domestic policies, I really don't think that Trump is going to be able to get much done. Um, yeah, I don't see it happening. I see what I see happening is pretty much a repeat of 2016, where, don't get me wrong, he can cause some damage, like with executive orders, and uh, it's remains to be seen, I guess, whether the Democrats will have control of the House. I'm not sure where we are on that, but even if the Republicans do take the House, they will have a pretty slim majority. So there's really a limit to what Trump can accomplish in legislative terms. Yeah, and I'm kind of just thinking out loud. Uh, I'm not trying to comfort you, and I'm also not trying to scare you either. This is just how I think things are going to play out based on present conditions in the United States. I will say that I am not even remotely shocked that Trump won. Um, yeah, like I said, I think Harris really, really ran a terrible campaign. And the more she talked, the less people were uh, convinced by her rhetoric. And we can do a lot of prognosticating about that. Um, I I tend to think that the answer moving forward has to be um, advocating for universal policies, um, very clear universal policies that people can easily understand, not like means tested subsidies and tax credits and stuff like that. This is not a particularly unique or original perspective on my part. I'm just kind of parroting a lot of things that people in people who like support Bernie Sanders say. Um, but it makes sense to me. Like I would say, single payer. It's an extremely popular policy. Um, when you poll, even a lot of Republicans support it when they're asked directly. So, if you tell the average American, you no longer have to worry about health insurance, I think they're on board with it. Um, and like I said, there was that ballot initiative in Illinois that passed with flying colors um, to tax millionaires. I think that's an extremely popular position. Um, what else? I mean, 4-day work week, I think would be a big game changer. Just putting 4-day work week on your as part of your platform. Anything over um, anything, I don't know, anything over like 32 hours a week should be overtime. Yeah, just as simple as that. I think people would get on board with that. Look, and there's economic fallout to every single one of these policy proposals, but I'm talking about what it would take to get somebody elected, right? I'm not talking about actually following through with any of these policies. Obviously, theoretically, I support all of them, but they are not without their problems. There's no solution to all of the problems that capitalism creates within the system. There's no reformist solution to these things, right? Um, so we're going to see the contradictions of capitalism play out over the next 4 years. Specifically, I will say it's pretty clear to me there's going to be a recession at some point during Trump's term. So how he responds to that situation will be very interesting. We saw how he responded to COVID. In some ways, he was incredibly inept in his response. In other ways, it's kind of interesting, right? He wrote checks to Americans. He sent out checks to every single American. Not something you would traditionally think a Republican would do, but when a crisis like COVID happens, all of a sudden your politics, you know, they fly out the window. Uh, Especially when so, and I think that's probably more applicable to Congress in general. Like it's quite interesting that Congress came together and agreed to send people stimulus checks. Um, there's a fire under their ass when Congress can agree to do something. There's a problem if there is bipartisan support to give money to everyday Americans, then there is some kind of crisis happening if politicians can agree to that. So, so that's just an example of how things can shift dramatically when there's a crisis. Um, so like I think it's pretty clear there's going to be a recession under Trump. It's really just a matter of where that crisis emerges from, what sector it emerges from. It could just be a repeat of 2008 with the housing crisis, but I'm not so sure about that. It could emerge from a combination of things. It could emerge from I mean the if I say the financial sector, obviously that's a very vague claim, right? But my inclination is to say it would emerge from the financial sector in some way. Um, we know a lot of corporations are just sort of zombie corporations that have taken on huge amounts of debt that they're not going to be able to pay back. So it's only a matter of time um, before things come to a head. And we also have AI, right? We have LLMs emerging, and this is a very interesting technology, right? A lot of people sort of uh, are sick of hearing about it, understandably, because a lot of tech moguls are hyping it up and making claims about it that are kind of pie in the sky. But at the same time, it is getting better. Um, you know, there have been pretty pretty measurable improvements in this technology over the past couple years, to the point where it's starting to get really good. And it is plausible to me that if you continue along this trajectory, it's going to be able to do things that a lot of white collar workers, you know, it could very, in other words, it could very easily displace a lot of jobs, I think. Um, so when you have that happening at the same time, there is a potential recession happening. It seems like the outcome is overdetermined, right? Like it seems like a lot of people could lose their jobs, and unemployment. Um, I can see a scenario where unemployment goes through the roof. So this is a concern to me. Um, yeah, I don't know. I don't exactly. The real question to me is how the government responds to a crisis like that. Um, and I'm not so sure. But I've gone on a huge tangent here. Maybe I've given you enough to think about. This is just uh, my channel update, right? This is what's going through my head right now. I'm just kind of rambling, I suppose. So, yeah, maybe you can find some value in what I'm saying, or if you think it's completely nuts, feel free to let me know. I won't take too much offense to it, assuming you are uh, offering an interesting perspective, you know. Um, anyway, yeah, and that's the thing. It's funny, right? Like I put out that statement on my community page, and yeah, I'm not saying anything that crazy, honestly. I just think the Democrats should focus on um, universal policies that people can understand. Um, I don't think they understand this tax credit bullshit. I don't think they really even understand. Like they don't. It's too abstract. Means tested subsidies and all that. They just don't. They can't connect the dots. Especially people who are just like living paycheck to paycheck just don't. I think they just kind of check out when it comes to that stuff. Um, but yeah, I just kind of went on a little rant about the failures of the Democratic Party to kind of meet the moment, you know. Um, and I lost about maybe like 20 subscribers. For context, I have like 60,000 subscribers, and they're mostly they're mostly like not people who engage with my content regularly. So it's kind of a useless number in the first place, and it would probably be good if I filtered some people out who aren't interested in my perspective. Um, you know, so, but that's just kind of the quirks of YouTube. I don't know. Maybe I should start another channel where I talk about stuff like this, but it's I kind of have too much shit to do as it is. Um, but yeah, I'm excited about this analysis I'm working on. I think I might be talking about a lot of things that are kind of converging with this conversation right now. So stay tuned. I don't quite know when I'm going to be done with that. It just depends on how much sulking I do this weekend versus how much actual work I get done, you know. But that's always the case, I suppose. I'll let you go, and I hope you have a good weekend. Um, and stay strong. Don't give up hope. This is all there's a lot of stuff going on right now. It's important to think critically. It's important to stay engaged. It's important to see through the noise, right? Like there's a lot of noise out there. There's a lot of bullshit. So you know, um, keep your head on straight and um, stay strong.